Yoruba people. Ethnic group in West Africa. The Yoruba people, JRB, YORRUB, Yoruba, Oran Yoruba, Omo Oduduwa, Omo Karo Ujir, are a West African ethnic group who mainly inhabit parts of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. The areas of these countries primarily inhabited by the Yoruba are often collectively referred to as Yorubaland. The Yoruba constitute more than 50 million people in Africa, or over a million outside the continent, and bear further representation among members of the African diaspora. The vast majority of the Yoruba population is today within the country of Nigeria, where they make up 20.7% of the country's population according to ethnologue estimations, making them one of the largest ethnic groups in Africa. Most Yoruba people speak the Yoruba language, which is the Niger-Congo language with the largest number of native or L1 speakers. In Africa, the Yoruba are contiguous with the Yoruboid Itsekiri to the southeast in the northwest Niger Delta, Bariba to the northwest in Benin and Nigeria, the Nupe to the north, and the Ebira to the northeast in central Nigeria. To the east are the Edo, Esan, and Afemai groups in midwestern Nigeria. To the northeast and adjacent to the Ebira and northern Edo, groups are the related Igala people on the left bank of the Niger River. To the south are the GBE-speaking Mahi, Gun, Fon, and Yu who border Yoruba communities in Benin and Togo. To the west they are bordered by the KWA-speaking Akabu, Pozo of Togo, and to the northwest, by the KWA-speaking Ani, and the Gur-speaking Kabiye, Yamlokpa and Tem people of Togo. Significantly Yoruba populations in other West African countries can also be found in Ghana, Benin, Ivory Coast, and Sierra Leone. Outside Africa, the Yoruba diaspora consists of two main groupings, the first being that of the Yorubas taken as slaves to the New World between the 16th to 19th centuries, notably to the Caribbean, especially in Cuba and Brazil, and the second consisting of a wave of relatively recent migrants, the majority of whom began to migrate to the United Kingdom and the United States following some of the major economic and political changes encountered in Africa in the 1960s to 1980s. Etymology. The oldest known textual reference to the name Yoruba is found in an essay titled Miraj al-Su'ud, from a manuscript written by the Berber jurist Ahmed Baba in the year 1614. The original manuscript is preserved in the Ahmed Baba Institute of the Mama Haidara Library, while a digital copy is at the World Digital Library. Miraj al-Su'ud provides one of the earliest known ideas about the ethnic composition of the West African interior. The relevant section of the essay, which lists the Yoruba group alongside 9 others in the region, is translated by John Hunwick and Fatima Herrick for the Institute of African Studies Rabat, reads, "We will add another rule for you, that is that whoever now comes to you from among the group called Masi, or Gurma, or Busa, or Borgu, or Dagomba, or Katokoli, or Yoruba, or Tombo, or Bobo, or K.Armu, all of these are unbelievers remaining in their unbelief until now. Similarly Kumbe except for a few people of Hambori." This early 1600s reference implies that the name Yoruba was already in popular demotic use as far back as at least the 1500s. Regarding the source and derivation of this name, guesses were posited by various foreign sociologists of external sources. These include Yarub, son of Canaanite, Joktan, by Muhammad Bello, Goru Ba by T.J. Bowen, or Yola Ba, Mande word for the Niger River, etc. These guesses suffer a lack of support by many locals for being alien to, and unfounded in, the traditions of the Yorubas themselves. In his work, Abeokuta and the Cameroon's Mountains c.1863, the English ethnologist Richard F. Burton reports of a Yoruba account in 1861, noting that the name, Yoruba, derives from Orioba, i.e. the head king. Based on oral and written sources, this name existed before the 1500s. It was applied ex situ originally in reference to the Yoruba socio-linguistic group as a whole. Centuries later, however, it evolved to be applied exclusively to the Oyo subgroup when this subgroup rose to attain imperial status, particularly at its apogee, c.1650 circa .1750, until in the mid-1800s when this trend was reversed back to the original context. Names. The word, Yoruba, has roots in a term Orioba meaning, the head king. In the work, Abeokuta and the Cameroon's Mountains c.1863, the English ethnologist Richard F. Burton reports of a Yoruba account in 1861 stating this. Based on oral and written sources, this name existed before the 1500s. It was applied in reference to the Yoruba socio-linguistic group as a whole. Synonymous terms such as Nago or Anago, Lakumi or Olakumi, and Aku, used in identifying the Yoruba people, is also widely used in areas where ethnic Yoruba, all or subgroups can be found. In comparison, the phrase of intra-ethno-linguistic origin used by the Yoruba people is Omo Karo Ujir, literally meaning, the people who ask, "Good morning, did you wake up well?" This is in reference to the culture of greetings identifiable within the Yoruba culture. Through parts of coastal West Africa, where Yorubas have been found, they have carried their culture of lauding one another with greetings of different forms, applicable in different situations, along with them. Another term used is Omo Udua, meaning, the children of Oduduwa, referencing the semi-legendary Yoruba king. The Yorubas are also called Alata in some Akan-speaking communities. History. By the 8th century, a powerful kingdom already existed in Ile-Ife, one of the earliest in Africa. It was viewed by the Yoruba as capital of the realm of humanity, based on the oldest pre-dynastic traditions of it being associated with Obatala, Sango, Yemoja, Oduduwa, Orunmila and a host of primordial beings believed to have descended from the heavens, Odoran, in Yoruba godlore. The historical Yoruba develop in situ, out of earlier Mesolithic Volta Niger populations, by the 1st millennium BCE. Oral history recorded under the Oyo Empire derives the Yoruba as an ethnic group from the population of the older kingdom of Ile-Ife. The Yoruba were the dominant cultural force in southern and northwestern Nigeria as far back as the 11th century. The Yoruba are among the most urbanized people in Africa. For centuries before the arrival of the British colonial administration, most Yoruba already lived in well-structured urban centers organized around powerful city-states, Ilu, centered around the residence of the Oba, king. In ancient times, most of these cities were fortresses, with high walls and gates. Yoruba cities have always been among the most populous in Africa. Archaeological findings indicate that Oyo-Ile or Katunga, capital of the Yoruba Empire of Oyo, flat between the 11th and 19th centuries CE, had a population of over 100,000 people. For a long time also, Ibadan, one of the major Yoruba cities and founded in the 1800s, was the largest city in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Today, Lagos, Yoruba, Eko, another major Yoruba city, with a population of over 20 million, remains the largest on the African continent. Archaeologically, the settlement of Ile-Ife showed features of urbanism in the 12th–14th century era. In the period around 1300 CE, the artists at Ile-Ife developed a refined and naturalistic sculptural tradition in terracotta, stone and copper alloy, copper, brass, and bronze, many of which appear to have been created under the patronage of King Abalufan II, the man who today is identified as the Yoruba patron deity of brass casting, weaving and regalia. The dynasty of kings at Ile-Ife, which is regarded by the Yoruba as the place of origin of human civilization, remains intact to this day. The urban phase of Ile-Ife before the rise of Oyo, circa 1100 to 1600, a significant peak of political centralization in the 12th century, is commonly described as a golden age of Ile-Ife. The Oba or ruler of Ile-Ife is referred to as the Uni of Ife. Ife continues to be seen as the spiritual homeland of the Yoruba. The city was surpassed by the Oyo Empire as the dominant Yoruba military and political power in the 11th century. The Oyo Empire under its Oba, known as the Alafin of Oyo, was active in the African slave trade during the 18th century. The Yoruba often demanded slaves as a form of tribute of subject populations, who in turn sometimes made war on other peoples to capture the required slaves. Part of the slaves sold by the Oyo Empire entered the Atlantic slave trade. Most of the city-states were controlled by Obas, or royal sovereigns with various individual titles, and councils made up of Aloyi, recognized leaders of royal, noble and, often, even common descent, who joined them in ruling over the kingdoms through a series of guilds and cults. Different states saw differing ratios of power between the kingships and the chiefs' councils. Some, such as Oyo, had powerful, autocratic monarchs with almost total control, while in others such as the Ijebu city-states, the senatorial councils held more influence and the power of the ruler or Oba, referred to as the Awuyale of Ijebuland, was more limited. In more recent decades, Lagos has risen to be the most prominent city of the Yoruba people in Yoruba cultural and economic influence. Noteworthy among the developments of Lagos were uniquely styled architecture introduced by returning Yoruba communities from Brazil and Cuba known as Amaros, Agudas. Yoruba settlements are often described as primarily one or more of the main social groupings called generations. The first generation includes towns and cities known as original capitals of founding Yoruba kingdoms or states. The second generation consists of settlements created by conquest. The third generation consists of villages and municipalities that emerged following the internecine wars of the 19th century. Language. The Yoruba culture was originally an oral tradition, and the majority of Yoruba people are native speakers of the Yoruba language. The number of speakers is estimated at 30 million in 2010. Yoruba is classified within the Edekiri languages, and together with the isolate Igala, form the Yoruboid group of languages within what we now have as West Africa. Igala and Yoruba have important historical and cultural relationships. The languages of the two ethnic groups bear such a close resemblance that researchers such as Ford, 1951, and Westerman and Bryan, 1952, regarded Igala as a dialect of Yoruba. The Yoruboid languages are assumed to have developed out of an undifferentiated Volta-Niger group by the first millennium BCE. There are three major dialect areas: Northwest, Central, and Southeast. As the Northwest Yoruba dialects show more linguistic innovation, combined with the fact that Southeast and Central Yoruba areas generally have older settlements, suggests a later date of immigration into Northwestern Yoruba territory. The area where Northwest Yoruba, NWY, is spoken corresponds to the historical Oyo Empire. Southeast Yoruba, SEY, was closely associated with the expansion of the Benin Empire after circa 1450. Central Yoruba forms a transitional area in that the lexicon has much in common with NWY, whereas it shares many ethnographical features with SEY. Literary Yoruba is the standard variety taught in schools and spoken by newsreaders on the radio. It is mostly entirely based on northwestern Yoruba dialects of the Oyos and the Egbas, and has its origins in two sources: the work of Yoruba Christian missionaries based mostly in the Egba hinterland at Abeokuta, and the Yoruba grammar compiled in the 1850s by Bishop Crowther, who himself was a Sierra Leonean recaptive of Oyo origin. This was exemplified by the following remark by Adatugbo, 1967, as cited in Fagboran, 1994, while the orthography agreed upon by the missionaries represented to a very large degree the phonemes of the Abeokuta dialect, the morphosyntax reflected the Oyo-Ibadan dialects. Group identity. Yoruba people have a sense of group identity around a number of cultural concepts, beliefs and practices recognizable by all members of the ethnic group. Prominent among these is the tracing of the entire Yoruba body through dynastic migrations to roots formed in Ile-Ife, an ancient city in the forested heart of central Yorubaland, and its acceptance as the spiritual nucleus of Yoruba existence. Following this linkage to the ancient city of Ife is the acknowledgement of an historic crowned king, Oduduwa, a personage nominally considered the father of the Yoruba people. According to Ife's own account, Oduduwa descended into the originally 13 semi-autonomous Proto-Ife communities which existed in a state of confederacy based around a swampy depression surrounded by 7 hills that would later on become Ife, from the community of Oki-Ora, an elevated abode located at the summit of a hill to Ife's east. The intervention of Oduduwa, a native of Oki-Ora and considered an outsider in the politics of the Ife Valley, is widely acknowledged in Ife to be the turning point that revolutionized the politics of the Confederacy, which was at the time led by Obatala. Beyond the historical accounts surrounding Ife and its ancient rulership, more cultural markers which unite the Yoruba people as members of the same ethnicity include the universal recognition of a number of spiritual concepts and chief divinities, Orisha, who have achieved pan-Yoruba statuses. These divinities are venerated as embodiments of natural forces and divine power. They are also the mediators between the common people and Olodumare, God. They include some now such well-known divinities as Obatala, Ogun, Orunmila, Osun, Eshu, Olakun, Yemoja, Osanyan, Shango, among others. These are now recognizable in the New World as divinities brought across the Atlantic by people of Yoruba descent. There, in their new ex situ environment, they serve as a mechanism of maintaining group identity, as well as a powerful connection to the Yoruba homeland among people of Yoruba descent and others. Examples of such New World practices are Santeria, Candomblé, Umbanda, Kele and Trinidad Orisha, which are not only religious societies, but also actual ethnic societies for those who sought to maintain their unique heritages over time, although anyone could join as long as they became immersed in the Yoruba worldview. Linguistically, the Yoruboid languages, and in particular the Edekiri subgroup, form a closed group of mutually intelligible dialects which strongly bound the people who speak them together as members of the same linguistic community. This dialectal area spans from the lands of the Ana-Ife people in central Togo and eastern Ghana eastwards to the lands of the Itsekiri people in the western Niger Delta around the Formosa, Benin, and Escravos River estuaries. This span of land, inhabited by geographically contiguous and culturally related subgroups, were divided into separate national and subnational units under the control of different European powers as a result of the Berlin Conference in 19th-century Europe and the resultant administration. The Yoruba also notably developed a common identity under the influence of Oyo, a regional empire that developed in the northwestern Savannah section of Yorubaland as a result of a kingdom-founding migration from Ife. As opposed to Oyo, which was a highly militaristic grassland polity, the Ife Empire was forest-based and spread its influence rather through religion, politics, philosophical ideology and commerce between 1200 and the mid-1400s. With the decline of Ife, Oyo expanded as the new Yoruba power and established its own influences over kingdoms stretching from central Togo in the west to central Yorubaland in the east, and from the Niger River in the north to the Atlantic coast in the south, taking in the whole of Dahomey, southern Borgu, the Mahi states, southern Nupe and the Asia people. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, Oyo had numerous campaigns in the region and established a reputation among the neighboring kingdoms of Ashanti, Dahomey, Borgu, Nupe, Igala and Benin as well as further afield in the lands of the Songhai, Hausa kingdoms and others, solidifying its place in the greater region as a powerhouse strategically placed between the forest and the savanna and representative of a cultural unit it powerfully defended and stood in association with. During the 18th century, in the days of Ajagbo and Oba of Oyo, the rulers of the Yoruba-speaking kingdoms of Oyo, Egba, Kitu, and Jebu styled each other brothers, while recognizing the leadership role Oyo plays among them. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Yoruba community was made up of the following principal units: the British colony of Lagos, traditionally called Eko, Kitu, a western Yoruba state bordering the kingdom of Dahomey, Egba, with its capital at Abeokuta, Jebu, a southern Yoruba kingdom in the immediate vicinity of an inland lagoon, a confederation of Ikiti sub-tribes in the hilly country to the northeast, Ibadan, a successor republican state to Oyo, Ijesha, the historic kingdom of Ife which continued to maintain its sacred primacy, Ondo, on the east, the littoral Mahin, Alaje on the southeastern maritime coast, and several other smaller states such as the Egbado, Akoko groups, Yagba, Awori as well as independent townships, consisting of a town and its outlying dependent villages such as Okiodun, Adu, Igbesa. Various other cultural factors which bind the Yoruba people include historic dynastic migrations of royals and the micro-migrations of people within the Yoruba cultural space which has led to the mixing of people evidenced by the duplication and multiplication of place names and royal titles across Yoruba country. Today, places with names containing OWU, Ifon, Ife, Adu etc. can be found scattered across Yorubaland regardless of subgroup. Same can be observed of certain localized royal titles e.g., Ajalorun, Owa, Olu. Olafin, the original title of Oduduwa in Ife is remembered in the lore of most places in Yorubaland. Occupational engagements like farming, hunting, crafting, blacksmithing, trading as well as fishing for the coastal or riparian groups are commonplace. Joint customs in greeting, birth, marriage and death, a strong sense of community, urbanism, festivities and a respect for the elderly are also all universal Yoruba concepts. Pre-colonial government of Yoruba society. Monarchies were a common form of government in Yorubaland, but they were not the only approach to government and social organization. The numerous Ijebu Kingdom city-states to the west of Oyo and the Egba people communities, found in the forests below Oyo's Savannah region, were notable exceptions. These independent polities often elected a king though real political, legislative, and judicial powers resided with the Ogboni, a council of notable elders. The notion of the divine king was so important to the Yoruba, however, that it has been part of their organization in its various forms from their antiquity to the contemporary era. During the internecine wars of the 19th century, the Ijebu forced citizens of more than 150 Egba and OWU communities to migrate to the fortified city of Abeokuta. Each quarter retained its own Ogboni council of civilian leaders, along with an Olorogun, or council of military leaders, and in some cases, its own elected Obas or Bals. These independent councils elected their most capable members to join a federal civilian and military council that represented the city as a whole. Commander Frederick Forbes, a representative of the British Crown writing an account of his visit to the city in the Church Military Intelligencer, 1853, described Abeokuta as having 4 presidents, and the system of government as having 840 principal rulers or House of Lords, 2,800 secondary chiefs or House of Commons, 140 principal military ones and 280 secondary ones. He described Abeokuta and its system of government as the most extraordinary republic in the world. Yoruba people. Ethnic group in West Africa. The Yoruba people, JRB-YORRUB, Yoruba, Oron Yoruba, Omo Oduduwa, Omo Karo Ujir, are a West African ethnic group who mainly inhabit parts of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. The areas of these countries primarily inhabited by the Yoruba are often collectively referred to as Yorubaland. The Yoruba constitute more than 50 million people in Africa, or over 1 million outside the continent, and bear further representation among members of the African diaspora. The vast majority of the Yoruba population is today within the country of Nigeria, where they make up 20.7% of the country's population according to ethnologue estimations, making them one of the largest ethnic groups in Africa. Most Yoruba people speak the Yoruba language, which is the Niger-Congo language with the largest number of native or L1 speakers. In Africa, the Yoruba are contiguous with the Yoruboid Itsekiri to the southeast in the northwest Niger Delta, Bariba to the northwest in Benin and Nigeria, the Nupe to the north, and the Ebira to the northeast in central Nigeria. To the east are the Edo, Esan, and Afemai groups in midwestern Nigeria. To the northeast and adjacent to the Ebira and northern Edo, groups are the related Igala people on the left bank of the Niger River. To the south are the GBE-speaking Mahi, Gun, Fon, and Yu who border Yoruba. This early 1600s reference implies that the Oyo Empire in Yoruba, the first generation. Traditionally, kingship and chieftainship were not determined by simple primogeniture, as in most monarchies. Gerontocratic leadership councils that guarded against the monopolization of power by a monarch were a trait of the Egba, according to the eminent Oyo historian Reverend Samuel Johnson. Such councils were also well developed among the northern Okun groups, the eastern Ikiti, and other groups falling under the Yoruba ethnic umbrella. In Oyo, the most centralized of the pre-colonial kingdoms, the Olofin consulted on all political decisions with the prime minister and principal kingmaker, the Basoran, and the rest of the council of leading nobles known as the Oyo Messi. Traditionally, kingship and chieftainship were not determined by simple primogeniture, as in most monarchic systems of government. An electoral college of lineage heads was and still is usually charged with selecting a member of one of the royal families from any given realm, and the selection is then confirmed by an Ifa oracular request. The Obas live in palaces that are usually in the center of the town. Opposite the king's palace is the Oya Oba, or the king's market. These markets form an inherent part of Yoruba life. Traditionally, their traders are well organized, have various guilds, officers, and an elected speaker. They also often have at least one Ialoja, or lady of the market, who is expected to represent their interests in the aristocratic council of Aloyes at the palace. The monarchy of any city-state was usually limited to a number of royal lineages. A family could be excluded from kingship and chieftaincy if any family member, servant, or slave belonging to the family committed a crime, such as theft, fraud, murder or rape. In other city-states, the monarchy was open to the election of any free-born male citizen. In Elisa, Ondo, Akure and other Yoruba communities, there were several, but comparatively rare, traditions of female obas. The kings were traditionally almost always polygamous and often married royal family members from other domains, thereby creating useful alliances with other rulers. Ibadan, a city-state and proto-empire that was founded in the 1800s by a polyglot group of refugees, soldiers, and itinerant traders after the fall of Oyo, largely dispensed with the concept of monarchism, preferring to elect both military and civil councils from a pool of eminent citizens. The city became a military republic, with distinguished soldiers wielding political power through their election by popular acclaim and the respect of their peers. Similar practices were adopted by the Ijesa and other groups, which saw a corresponding rise in the social influence of military adventurers and successful entrepreneurs. The Igbamina were renowned for their agricultural and hunting prowess, as well as their woodcarving, leather art, and the famous Elowe masquerade. Occupational guilds, social clubs, secret or initiatory societies, and religious units, commonly known as Egbe in Yoruba, included the Parakoi, or League of Traders, an Egbeode, Hunters Guild, and maintained an important role in commerce, social control, and vocational education in Yoruba polities. There are also examples of other peer organizations in the region. When the Egba resisted the imperial domination of the Oyo Empire, a figure named Lasabi is credited with either creating or reviving a covert traditional organization named Egbiero. This group, originally a farmers' union, was converted to a network of secret militias throughout the Egba forests, and each lodge plotted and successfully managed to overthrow Oyo's Ahilas, appointed administrators, in the late 18th century. Similarly, covert military resistance leagues like the Ikiti Parapo and the Ojidi Alliance were organized during the 19th century wars by often decentralized communities of the Ikiti, Ijesa, Igbamina and Okun Yoruba to resist various imperial expansionist plans of Ibadan, Nupe, and the Sokoto Caliphate. Society and culture. In the city-states and many of their neighbors, a reserved way of life remains, with the school of thought of their people serving as a major influence in West Africa and elsewhere. Today, most contemporary Yoruba are Muslims or Christians. Be that as it may, many of the principles of the traditional faith of their ancestors are either knowingly or unknowingly upheld by a significant proportion of the populations of Nigeria, Benin and Togo. The Yoruba religion comprises the traditional religious and spiritual concepts and practices of the Yoruba people. Its homeland is in southwestern Nigeria and the adjoining parts of Benin and Togo, a region that has come to be known as Yorubaland. Yoruba religion is formed of diverse traditions and has no single founder. Yoruba religious beliefs are part of Itan, the total complex of songs, histories, stories, mythologies, and other cultural concepts that make up the Yoruba society. Next to the veneration of ancestors, one of the most common Yoruba traditional religious concepts has been the concept of Orisa. Orisa, also spelled Orisha, are various gods and spirits, which serve the ultimate creator force in the Yoruba religious system, Ace. Some widely known Orisa are Ogun, a god of metal, war and victory, Shango or Jakuta, a god of thunder, lightning, fire and justice who manifests as a king and who always wields a double-edged axe that conveys his divine authority and power, Esu Elegbara, a trickster who serves as the sole messenger of the pantheon, and who conveys the wish of men to the gods. He understands every language spoken by humankind, and is also the guardian of the crossroads, Orita Mata in Yoruba, and Oranmila, a god of the oracle. Eshu has two forms, which are manifestations of his dual nature, positive and negative energies, Eshu Leroy, a teacher instructor and leader, and Eshu Ebida, a jester, deceitful, suggestive and cunning. Oranmila, for his part, reveals the past, gives solutions to problems in the present, and influences the future through the Ifa divination system, which is practiced by oracle priests called Babalawos. Olorun is one of the principal manifestations of the supreme god of the Yoruba pantheon, the owner of the heavens, and is associated with the sun known as Urun in the Yoruba language. The two other principal forms of the supreme god are Olodumare, the supreme creator, and Olophen, who is the conduit between Orun, heaven, and Eye, earth. Oshumare is a god that manifests in the form of a rainbow, also known as Osumare in Yoruba, while Obatala is the god of clarity and creativity. These gods feature in the Yoruba religion, as well as in some aspects of Umbanda, Winti, Obia, Vodun and a host of others. These varieties, or spiritual lineages as they are called, are practiced throughout areas of Nigeria, among others. As interest in African indigenous religions grows, Orisa communities and lineages can be found in parts of Europe and Asia as well. While estimates may vary, some scholars believe that there could be more than 100 million adherents of this spiritual tradition worldwide. Oral history of the Oyo Yoruba recounts Oduduwa to be the progenitor of the Yoruba and the reigning ancestor of their crowned kings. He came from the east, understood in Ife traditions to be the settlement of Oki-Ora, a hilltop community situated to the east of Ife. After the death of Oduduwa, there was a dispersal of his children in a series of kingdom-founding migrations from Ife to found other kingdoms. Each child made his or her mark in the subsequent urbanization and consolidation of the Yoruba Confederacy of Kingdoms, with each kingdom tracing its origin due to them to Ife. After the dispersal, the Aborigines became difficult, and constituted a serious threat to the survival of Ife. Thought to be survivors of the old occupants of the land before the arrival of Oduduwa, these people now turned themselves into marauders. They would come to town in costumes made of raffia with terrible and fearsome appearances, and burn down houses and loot the markets. Then came Moremi Ajisoro into the scene. She was said to have played a significant role in the quelling of the marauder advancements. But this was at a great price, having to give up her only son Olorogbo. The reward for her patriotism and selflessness was not to be reaped in one lifetime, as she later passed on and was thereafter deified. The Edi festival celebrates this feat among her Yoruba descendants. Yoruba culture consists of cultural philosophy, religion and folktales. They are embodied in Ifa divination, and are known as the tripartite Book of Enlightenment in Yorubaland and in its diaspora. Yoruba cultural thought is a witness of two epochs. The first epoch is a history of cosmogony and cosmology. This is also an epoch making history in the oral culture during which time Oduduwa was the king, the bringer of light, pioneer of Yoruba folk philosophy, and a prominent diviner. He pondered the visible and invisible worlds, reminiscing about cosmogony, cosmology, and the mythological creatures in the visible and invisible worlds. His time favored the artist-philosophers who produced magnificent naturalistic artworks of civilization during the pre-dynastic period in Yorubaland. The second epoch is the epoch of metaphysical discourse and the birth of modern artist philosophy. This commenced in the 19th century in terms of the academic prowess of Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther, 1807 to 1891. Although religion is often first in Yoruba culture, nonetheless, it is the philosophy, the thought of man, that actually leads spiritual consciousness, ori, to the creation and the practice of religion. Thus, it is believed that thought, philosophy, is an antecedent to religion. Values such as respect, peaceful coexistence, loyalty and freedom of speech are both upheld and highly valued in Yoruba culture. Societies that are considered secret societies often strictly guard and encourage the observance of moral values. Today, the academic and non-academic communities are becoming more interested in Yoruba culture. More research is being carried out on Yoruba cultural thought as more books are being written on the subject. The Yoruba are traditionally very religious people, and are today pluralistic in their religious convictions. The Yoruba are one of the more religiously diverse ethnic groups in Africa. Many Yoruba people practice Christianity in denominations such as Anglicanism, while others are Muslims practicing mostly under Sunni Islam of the Maliki school of law. In addition to Christianity and Islam, a large number of Yoruba people continue to practice their traditional religion. Yoruba religious practices such as the Ayo and Osun Osogbo festivals are witnessing a resurgence in popularity in contemporary Yorubaland. They are largely seen by the adherents of the modern faiths as cultural, rather than religious, events. They participate in them as a means to celebrate their people's history and boost tourism in their local economies. The Yorubas were one of the first groups in West Africa to be introduced to Christianity on a very large scale. Christianity, along with Western civilization, came into Yorubaland in the mid-19th century through the Europeans, whose original mission was commerce. The first European visitors were the Portuguese. They visited the neighboring Benin Kingdom in the late 16th century. As time progressed, other Europeans, such as the French, the British, the Dutch, and the Germans, followed suit. The British and the French were the most successful in their quest for colonies. These Europeans actually split Yorubaland, with the larger part being in British Nigeria, and the minor parts in French Dahomey, now Benin, and German Togoland. Home governments encouraged religious organizations to come. Roman Catholics, known to the Yorubas as Iyo-Aguda, so named after returning former Yoruba slaves from Latin America, who were mostly Catholic, and were also known as the Agudas or Amaros, started the race, followed by Protestants, whose prominent member, Church Mission Society, CMS, based in England, made the most significant inroads into the hinterland regions for evangelism and became the largest of the Christian missions. Methodists, known as Iyo-Eleto, so named after the Yoruba word for method or process, started missions in Agbadariji, Gbegal by Thomas Birch Freeman in 1842. Agbadariji was further served by E.C. Van Cooten, E.G. Irving, and A. Harrison. Henry Townsend, C.C. Golmer, and Ajayi Crowther of the CMS worked in Abeokuta, then under the Egba Division of southern Nigeria in 1846. Hinderer and Mann of CMS started missions in Ibadan, Ibarapa and IJ divisions of the present Oyo State in 1853. Baptist missionaries, Bowen and Clark, concentrated on the northern Yoruba axis, Ogbomoso and environs. With their success, other religious groups, the Salvation Army and the Evangelists Commission of West Africa, became popular among the Igbamina, and other non-denominational Christian groups joined. The increased tempo of Christianity led to the appointment of Seros, returning slaves from Sierra Leone, and indigenes as missionaries. This move was initiated by Venn, the CMS secretary. Nevertheless, the impact of Christianity in Yorubaland was not felt until the fourth decade of the 19th century, when a Yoruba slave boy, Samuel Ajayi Crowther, became a Christian convert, linguist and minister whose knowledge in languages would become a major tool and instrument to propagate Christianity in Yorubaland and beyond. Islam came into Yorubaland around the 14th century, as a result of trade with Wangara, also Wankor, merchants, a mobile caste of the Sonikis from the then Mali Empire who entered Yorubaland, Oyo, from the northwestern flank through the Bariba or Borgu corridor, during the reign of Mansa Kankan Musa. Due to this, Islam is traditionally known to the Yoruba as Isan male or simply I-male, i.e. religion of the Malians. The adherents of the Islamic faith are called Musulumi in Yoruba to correspond to Muslim, the Arabic word for an adherent of Islam having as the active participle of the same verb form, and means submitter to Allah, or a nominal and active participle of Islam derivative of Salam, i.e., religion of peace. Islam was practiced in Yorubaland so early on in history that a sizable proportion of Yoruba slaves taken to the Americas were already Muslim. The mosque served the spiritual needs of Muslims living in Oyo. Progressively, Islam started to gain a foothold in Yorubaland and Muslims started building mosques. Iwo led its first mosque built in 1655, followed by Isian in 1760, Eko, Lagos in 1774, Shaki in 1790, and Osogbo in 1889. In time, Islam spread to other towns like Oyo. The first Oyo convert was Solagberu, Ibadan, Abeokuta, Ijebu-Ode, Ikirun, and Ede. All of these cities already had sizable Muslim communities before the 19th century Sokoto jihad. Medieval Yoruba settlements were surrounded with massive mud walls. Yoruba buildings had similar plans to the Ashanti shrines but with verandas around the court. The wall materials comprised puddled mud and palm oil while roofing materials ranged from thatches to corrugated iron sheets. A famous Yoruba fortification, the Sungbo Zaredo, was the second largest wall edifice in Africa. The structure was built in the 9th, 10th and 11th centuries in honor of a traditional aristocrat, the Aloyi Bilikisu Sungbo. It was made up of sprawling mud walls in the valleys that surrounded the town of Ijebu-Ode in Ogun State. Sungbo Zaredo is the largest pre-colonial monument in Africa, larger than the Great Pyramid or Great Zimbabwe. The Yorubas worked with a wide array of materials in their art including bronze, leather, terracotta, ivory, textiles, copper, stone, carved wood, brass, ceramics and glass. A unique feature of Yoruba art is its striking realism that, unlike most African art, chose to create human sculptures in vividly realistic and life-sized forms. The art history of the nearby Benin Empire shows that there was a cross-fertilization of ideas between the neighboring Yoruba and Edo. The Benin court's brass casters learned their art from an Ife master named Igwega, who had been sent from Ife around 1400 at the request of Benin's Oba Oguola. Indeed, the earliest dated cast brass memorial heads from Benin replicate the refined naturalism of the earlier Yoruba sculptures from Ife. A lot of Yoruba artwork, including staffs, court dress, and beadwork for crowns, are associated with palaces and the royal courts. The courts also commissioned numerous architectural objects such as veranda posts, gates, and doors that are embellished with carvings. Yoruba palaces are usually built with thicker walls, are dedicated to the gods and play significant spiritual roles. Yoruba art is also manifested in shrines and masking traditions. The shrines dedicated to the said gods are adorned with carvings and house an array of altar figures and other ritual paraphernalia. Masking traditions vary by region, and diverse mask types are used in various festivals and celebrations. Aspects of Yoruba traditional architecture has also found its way into the New World in the form of shotgun houses. Today, however, Yoruba traditional architecture has been greatly influenced by modern trends. Masquerades are an important feature of Yoruba traditional artistry. They are generally known as Egungun, singularly as Egun. The term refers to the Yoruba masquerades connected with ancestor reverence, or to the ancestors themselves as a collective force. There are different types of which one of the most prominent is the Gelid. An essay Ifa, oral literature of Orunmila divination, explains the origins of Gelid as beginning with Yemoja, the mother of all the Orisa and all living things. Yemoja could not have children and consulted an Ifa oracle, and the priest advised her to offer sacrifices and to dance with wooden images on her head and metal anklets on her feet. After performing this ritual, she became pregnant. Her first child was a boy, nicknamed Efe, the humorist, joker. The Efe mask emphasizes song and jests because of the personality of its namesake. Yemoja's second child was a girl, nicknamed Gelid, because she was obese like her mother. Also like her mother, Gelid loved dancing. After getting married themselves, neither Gelid or Efe's partner could have children. The Ifa oracle suggested they try the same ritual that had worked for their mother. No sooner than Efe and Gelid performed these rituals, dancing with wooden images on their heads and metal anklets on their feet, they started having children. These rituals developed into the Gelid masked dance and were perpetuated by the descendants of Fa and Gelid. This narrative is one of many stories that explains the origin of Gelid. An old theory stated that the beginning of Gelid might be associated with the change from a matriarchal to a patriarchal society among the Yoruba people. The Gelid spectacle and the Ifa divination system represent two of Nigeria's only 3 pieces on the United Nations Oral and Intangible Heritages of Humanity list, as well as the only such cultural heritage from Benin and Togo. One of the first observations of first-time visitors to Yorubaland is the rich, exuberant and ceremonial nature of their culture, which is made even more visible by the urbanized structures of Yoruba settlements. These occasions are avenues to experience the richness of the Yoruba culture. Traditional musicians are always on hand to grace the occasions with heavy rhythms and extremely advanced percussion, which the Yorubas are well known for all over the world. Praise singers and griots are there to add their historical insight to the meaning and significance of the ceremony, and of course the varieties of colorful dresses and attires worn by the people attest to the aesthetic sense of the average Yoruba. The Yoruba are a very expressive people who celebrate major events with colorful festivals and celebrations. Some of these festivals, about 13 principal ones, are secular and only mark achievements and milestones in the achievement of mankind. These include wedding ceremonies, Ibeyawo, naming ceremonies, Isamaruko, funerals, Izinku, housewarming, Isale, New Yam Festival, Ijesu, harvest ceremonies, Ikor, birth, Ibi, chieftaincy, Ijoy, and so on. Others have a more spiritual connotation, such as the various days and celebrations dedicated to specific Orisha like the Ogun Day, Ojo Ogun, or the Osun Festival, which is usually done at the Osun Osogbo Sacred Grove located on the banks of the Osun River and around the ancient town of Osogbo. The festival is dedicated to the river goddess Osun, which is usually celebrated in the month of August, Osu Ogun, yearly. The festival attracts thousands of Osun worshippers from all over Yorubaland and the Yoruba diaspora in the Americas, spectators and tourists from all walks of life. The Osun Osogbo Festival is a 2-week-long program. It starts with the traditional cleansing of the town called Iwapopo, which is then followed in 3 days by the lighting of the 500-year-old 16-point lamp called Inaoli Amarindin Lagun, which literally means the 16-eyed fire. The lighting of this sacred lamp heralds the beginning of the Osun festival. Then comes the Ibro Raid, an assemblage of the crowns of the past ruler, the Ataoya of Osogbo, for blessings. This event is led by the sitting Ataoya of Osogbo and the Arugba Ye Osun, who is usually a young virgin from the royal family dressed in white, who carries a sacred white calabash that contains propitiation materials meant for the goddess Osun. She is also accompanied by a committee of priestesses. A similar event holds in the New World as Odunde Festival. Another very popular festival with spiritual connotations is the Io-Olokun Festival or Adamu Orisha Play, celebrated by the people of Lagos. The Io festival is a dedication to the god of the sea Olokun, who is an Orisha, and whose name literally means owner of the seas. Generally, there is no customarily defined time for the staging of the Io festival. This leads to a building anticipation as to what date would be decided upon. Once a date for its performance is selected and announced, the festival preparations begin. It encompasses a week-long series of activities and culminates in a striking procession of thousands of men clothed in white and wearing a variety of colored hats, called aga. The procession moves through Lagos Island Assail Echo, which is the historical center of the Lagos metropolis. On the streets, they move through various crucial locations and landmarks in the city, including the palace of the traditional ruler of Lagos, the Oba, known as the Iga Idanganran. The festival starts from dusk to dawn, and has been held on Saturdays, Ojo Abamata, from time immemorial. A full week before the festival, always a Sunday, the senior Io group, the Adimu, identified by a black broad-rimmed hat, goes public with a staff. When this happens, it means the event will take place on the following Saturday. Each of the 4 other important groups, Laba, red, Oniko, yellow, Ologid, green, and Agere, purple, take their turns in that order from Monday to Thursday. The Io masquerade essentially admits tall people, which is why it is described as a Gogoro Io, literally meaning the tall Io masquerade. In the manner of a spirit, an Orisha, visiting the earth on a purpose, the Io masquerade speaks in a ventriloquial voice, suggestive of its otherworldliness, and when greeted, it replies, Moyo fun era am I, which in Yoruba means, I rejoice for you, and I rejoice for myself. This response connotes the masquerades as rejoicing with the person greeting it for the witnessing of the day, and its own joy at taking the hallowed responsibility of cleansing. During the festival, sandals and footwear, as well as suku, a hairstyle that is popular among the Yorubas, one that has the hair converge at the middle, then shoot upward before tipping downward, are prohibited. The festival has also taken a more touristic dimension in recent times, which, like the Osun Osogbo festival, attracts visitors from all across Nigeria, as well as Yoruba diaspora populations. In fact, it is widely believed that the play is one of the manifestations of the customary African revelry that serves as the forerunner of the modern carnival in Brazil and other parts of the New World, which may have been started by the Yoruba slaves transplanted in that part of the world due to the Atlantic slave trade. The music of the Yoruba people is perhaps best known for an extremely advanced drumming tradition, especially using the dundun hourglass tension drums. The representation of musical instruments on sculptural works from life indicates, in general terms, a substantial accord with oral traditions. A lot of these musical instruments date back to the classical period of life, which began at around the 10th century AD. Some were already present prior to this period, while others were created later. The hourglass tension drum, dundun, for example, may have been introduced around the 15th century, 1400s. The Benin bronze plaques of the Middle Period depicts them. Others like the double and single iron clapper-less bells are examples of instruments that preceded classical life. Yoruba folk music became perhaps the most prominent kind of West African music in Afro-Latin and Caribbean musical styles. Yoruba music left an especially important influence on the music of Trinidad, the Lakumi religious traditions, capoeira practice in Brazil and the music of Cuba. Yoruba drums typically belong to four major families, which are used depending on the context or genre where they are played. The dundun, gangan family, is the class of hourglass-shaped talking drums, which imitate the sound of Yoruba speech. This is possible because the Yoruba language is tonal in nature. It is the most common and is present in many Yoruba traditions, such as Apala, Juju, Sakari and Afrobeat. The second is the Sakara family. Typically, they played a ceremonial role in royal settings, weddings and oriki recitation. It is predominantly found in traditions such as Sakara music, Wur and Fuji music. The Gabdu family, literally, large drum, is used by secret fraternities such as the Ogboni and royal courts. Historically, only the Oba might dance to the music of the drum. If anyone else used the drum, they were arrested for sedition of royal authority. The Gabdu are conga-shaped drums played while they sit on the ground. Akuba drums, a trio of smaller conga-like drums related to the Gabdu, are typically used in Afrobeat. The Ohido is a cousin of the Gbedu. It is also shaped like a conga but with a wider array of sounds and a bigger body. It also has a much deeper sound than the conga. It is sometimes referred to as the bass drum. Both hands play directly on the Ohido drum.